Put yourself in the shoes of a 1950s sheriff's deputy. When a local shop owner goes missing, you track down her whereabouts to the last person who appeared in her item payment registry at the store. Down a farm road sits a house dilapidating in the Wisconsin air year after year, who homes someone notoriously odd. He wasn't quite right after his mother passed away, but his family members have said that he has never been quite right. Most of the citizens in your community write him off as the town resident weirdo, but he does honest work. He gets handyman jobs here and there, off and on, and he's actually pretty well regarded as a local babysitter by parents and kids. You never expect what you find inside. There hangs your missing person, hanging upside down, naked, gutted, and decapitated. She is so unrecognizable that you almost mistook her for the body of an animal since it is deer season. But this is only the beginning. A freezer of organs and body parts, a heart on the stove in a pan ready to be cooked, makeshift waste baskets made out of hollowed out heads, a costume of a woman made out of the flesh and skin of a woman, complete with set of breasts, masks made of human faces, and a chair upholstered with human skin and cushioned with human fat. This is just the beginning. The list of horrors goes on and on. These were the crimes of Ed Gein. He had 7 suspected murders, 2 confirmed murders, 9 corpses in his home, but was only charged of murder twice. That's because Ed Gein not only was an artist of sorts, but he also was a grave robber. Ed Gein went on to inspire in part the book and Hitchcock film Psycho, as well as Silence of the Lambs antagonist Buffalo Bill, who wore human skin, and most famously Texas Chainsaw Massacre's Leatherface. Today we are going to discuss the life, crimes, and crazy progression of Ed Gein, and we're also going to compare it to the movie that he is most notably inspired, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This video, in case you couldn't tell by the warning at the beginning and that crazy intro, is gonna get pretty graphic and pretty brutal, so if you're grossed out, it's not gonna get any better. But I would like to say that because this was a real murder and these victims have real families, I'm not going to show any of the crime scene photos out of respect for them. So hopefully my video will still be entertaining and also respectful to anyone who may be related to any of his victims. Hey everyone, welcome back to Melody Ever After. Today is the second video in my series Horror Movies in Real Life, where I talk about the inspirations behind some of the biggest horror movies to ever hit the big screen. Today's video is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the real-life Leatherface, Ed Gein. Before we get too deep into the video, I do want to take a little selfless ad break. It's selfless because it is sponsored by me. Melody Ever After and the Melody Ever After website. By now, I have some pretty faithful followers who know about Melody Ever After's website, but I would really appreciate it if you go there. It has links to my merch shop. It's pretty cool. I like my merch. I've ordered some of it and it's pretty good, so I think you should check it out. It also has links to all of my social media, so if you want to connect with me personally, I would love to hear from you. You can check me out on TikTok, YouTube, Discord, anything in this lovely list of icons right here. I would really appreciate it if you checked out some of my merch. I made it all myself. I'm super proud of it. I know. Thank you. Thank you. It supports the channel and it helps me continue to make videos about the things that I love to make videos about. Check me out. Hit that like and subscribe. Go to my website. Whatever you gotta do. The ad break is over. Ed Gein was born in 1906 in Wisconsin. And he was born into a household that is probably the best combo of parents you can have. Chronic alcoholic and crazy religious mom. So, you know, he was off to a good start from the very beginning, probably. That was a joke in poor taste. That literally was probably the worst combination of parents I can imagine. His dad was a chronic alcoholic who was pretty much beat into submission by his wife, and Ed Gein's mother was a holy roller religious person who believed that everyone in their small town of Wisconsin was nothing but a sinner. She was kind of crazy. Ed Gein and his brother weren't really allowed to— that's my dog breathing heavily, by the way. Ed Gein and his brother really weren't allowed to leave the house except for to go to school. Oakley, stop. Ed Gein and his brother weren't really allowed to leave their childhood home except for to go to school, but it is reported that when they went to school, they were not allowed to have friends, because friends is sinful, I guess? Gein's brother got pretty fed up with this kind of behavior from his parents, and he didn't like being treated that way, so he left home. But his polar opposite brother, Ed, obsessively worshipped his mother. He never dated, never had a girlfriend, and never left home up until the time that he was 45 years old. Ed Gein and his brother frequently got into arguments, and they didn't get along very well. Ed Gein's brother was named Henry, and after their father George died, they were having an argument. That's when the local police got a call from Ed Gein about how his brother had gone missing after they were trying to stop a brush fire that was approaching their property. The year was 1944, and police went out to Ed Gein's property to see what was going on and if they could find this man, but it was peculiar that once the police arrived, Ed Gein led them straight to his brother Henry's body. And police found this odd because Henry's body was deceased, but lying directly on top of the burnt grass from the brush fire. He wasn't burnt up at all. Police speculated at the time that it was a misunderstanding and that Henry had succumbed to the smoke, got choked up, passed out, and hit his head, and that's how he had passed away. But looking back, it's pretty obvious that Ed Gein had killed Henry and then called the police to shift any blame off of himself. Whether that's his first murder or not is unspeculated. We don't really know the answer to that. Eventually, Gein's holy roller mother had passed away, and he began to sustain himself barely as a handyman and a highly esteemed babysitter. There is accounts of people in the community, both parents and kids, really enjoying his services, and he seemed to be a fairly nice guy. But he was still very odd. After his mother had passed away, the 2 rooms that his mother resided in, he locked those rooms up and then allowed the rest of the house to go to complete waste. He had those rooms in pristine condition, which nothing had been touched since his mother had left. The rest of the house was filled with items. It looked kind of like a hoarder house, and when they investigated the home, it was also filled with several corpses. Over the time of Ed Gein working as a handyman and babysitter, there had been several disappearances in the city that are now attributed to pretty much Ed Gein. We can't prove it for sure, but there are 7 bodies that they think that Ed Gein can be held accountable for. 54-year-old Mary Hogan, who ran a local tavern, who had an uncanny resemblance to Ed Gein's mother. Oedipus is quaking right now. Was one of these victims. On November 15th of 1967, it is reported that he visited a hardware store where Bernice Worden worked. She was the operator of this hardware store, and Ed Gein had reportedly visited and asked a lot of questions about antifreeze and was very interested in purchasing some antifreeze from Bernice. Bernice's son, the sheriff's deputy, found this very suspicious because he kind of kept to himself. Ed Gein was kind of a loner, and for him to be super interested in his mother was very strange to Bernice's son, Frank. On the next day, November 16th, Bernice Worden went missing. The shop was found locked up early, but all of the lights were left on inside. The operator of the gas station across the street contacted the sheriff about this and was like, "Was your mom supposed to lock up early?" And the sheriff's deputy was like, "No." Alarm bells are going off, and the sheriff's deputy goes to his mother's shop, looks the last person who purchased something on the register, and what do you know? It's Ed Gein. This is setting off major alarm bells for Deputy Frank Worden. They track down Ed Gein to his home, where they find the horrific scene that I have previously mentioned. Bernice Worden was found upside down, gutted like an animal, and decapitated. It's reported that one of the officers was so disgusted by what he had found that he had beat Ed Gein senselessly against the wall until he admitted a confession. And I know, police brutality, but in this case, I'm gonna say he deserved it. Under questioning, the 51-year-old Gein had said that he was guilty of shooting and killing both the tavern owner, and Bernice Worden. He said that he did it because they both had an uncanny resemblance to his mother, and this is where it starts to get really gross. They were kind of like, hey, Ed, if you only killed 2 people, where are all the other bodies from? And he's like,
oh yeah, I dug them up.
now, he pled insanity because he said that he used to go out into the graveyard and fantasize about digging up graves, but he never remembered doing it. I totally think that's a cop-out. I can look at this guy and I can tell that he probably knew what he was doing. Maybe that's rude of me, but I just refuse to believe that you just lose all control of your body, dig up graves, and then make a suit out of a woman. That's just not a normal human order of operations, okay? He admitted to defiling graves, mutilating corpses, necrophilia, and many people suspect cannibalism, given that so many organs were in his freezer and there was a human heart in a pan ready to be cooked when the police arrived. Gein was also notably accused of wearing the skin suit and dancing around outside, pretending to be in the body of his mother. He wished to, quote, crawl inside of his mother's skin. You ever met a man like that, ladies? Sorry. Ed Gein denied his right to a trial by jury, so the judge was going to be able to sentence him with whatever he saw fit, but it was apparent to the judge at that time that Ed Gein was not in his right mind, so he pled insanity, and he was put into a mental facility / prison. As for the house, in 1958, it was reported that it had been mysteriously burned down, and whoever did that was doing a service to humanity. I think that house should have been burned down by the police, to be honest. That once the evidence was obtained, they should have just burnt that sucker to the ground. Ed Gein filed for parole in 1974, and it was rejected due to an obvious media uproar. Oh, really? We don't want this guy out? Oh, really? It was in the late 70s with his health failing that Ed Gein passed away of respiratory failure. Tobe Hooper was the director and co-writer of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He was heavily inspired by Gein's acts to create this kind of movie. Everything from the dilapidated house where the set takes place to his main antagonist Leatherface wearing human skin, all is reminiscent of Ed Gein. But the main issue with this is how the beginning of Texas Chainsaw Massacre starts.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You see, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre was inspired by the events we just talked about, but there were no lost teenagers, there was no chainsaw involved. Okay, this is all speculation. And what was the reason that was put there? Tobe Hooper just said that it was an artistic choice and it was a reflection of American society at the time post-Vietnam War. He has also said that it's just a ploy to get people interested in the movie and draw a bigger crowd to the film, which it worked, not gonna lie. I've had so many people get on to me for clickbait. This is the ultimate clickbait, okay? This guy right here is the clickbait captain. The way that the people in Texas Chainsaw Massacre are held captive, to the way that Leatherface wears a mask of human skin, to the dilapidated house, to the notes of cannibalism, all are reminiscent and loosely based on the story of Ed Gein. But the problem is, people saw this slide in front of the movie, and they assumed that this whole story was true. So there was a little bit of historical context that got lost along the way, and people started watching this movie with the idea that this actually is the story of Ed Gein, which is not true. Ed Gein, while being a murderer, was mostly just a weirdo grave robber who mutilated some corpses. We all have our flaws. While there was a title screen before the movie that says that this was based on true events, it's obvious that this is just loosely based on the story of Ed Gein. Come to find out, Tobe Hooper also said that there's multiple murders that inspired the situation. The serial murderer Elmer Wayne Henley, that is hard to say, Elmer Wayne Henley in the city of Houston, Texas. Hence the name Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The main element we're missing here is, the chainsaw. You can't have a Texas Chainsaw Massacre without a chainsaw. Supposedly, the inspiration of the antagonist Leatherface carrying a chainsaw came from a busy store where Tobe Hooper was examining a wall of chainsaws, and it was completely crowded, and he thought to himself, I know a way to get through this crowd is if I would start up one of these chainsaws, and the sound of the chainsaw would make everybody run. And I think it's crazy that thought of clearing out a crowd by starting a chainsaw is not only what propelled the idea of Leatherface having a chainsaw, but also think of every haunted house you've ever been to. There's always some guy with overalls carrying a chainsaw. It's like a haunted house staple, okay? I don't think I've been to a haunted park that doesn't have a chainsaw guy. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was the first of its kind, as it was an exploitation film. And if you're a fan of the channel, if any of those exist, and if you're a fan of the channel, you know that I love exploitation films. This was a huge step in exploitation film / grindhouse film history. So it's pretty cool to look back on how the film was actually made and hear about the accounts of Tobe Hooper. But overall, Texas Chainsaw Massacre wasn't as inspired by Ed Gein as everybody seems to think it was. That is the story of Ed Gein, his crimes, and how it relates to Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you enjoyed this video, I'm a video essay channel that focuses on pop culture topics, true crime, video games, movies, TV shows, and more. So if you're interested in nerdy, geeky stuff like that, I would highly recommend you check out my channel. Like I said in the ad reel a little bit ago, check out my website. Maybe take a little gander at my merch. Not doing that again, sorry about that. Anyway, you've been watching Melody Ever After. Until next time.